Our next speaker, I met him, Martin shook my hand, and so I gave him an opportunity to speak today. He shook my hand by a swimming pool in Miami, of all places. I've been to this 3-day planning conference where I had networked and tried to sell PSFK to agencies. And Martin, I think, spent 3 days traveling around Miami, enjoying Miami for what it's good for. Anyway, so having met Martin, he sent me a copy of his DVD. And his DVD was of his series In Search of Cool, yeah? Where he spent his time traveling around the UK looking for and trying to understand what is cool and why we want to be cool and so forth. I'm sure he'll explain it better. But you know, at the start of today, I talked about how I'm obsessed with obsessives, and I think there's something about Martin's fascination with culture and the changing culture really turned me on. And so when he said I'd like to speak today, I said, great, can you talk about, you know, you're in search of cool? And he said no. So I thought, fuck. No, I thought, well, I trusted that Martin would come up today and talk about something fascinating and interesting. He's going to talk about his theory about visual business. And so I'd like you to welcome Martin Cole.
When Hugh came charging up here, I was like, no, that's my computer. Yeah, I took my picture off because just before I came up, I said I was a bit nervous about this to a friend of mine. I said, what do you think they'll think? And he said, well, your friends are there, you know, they like you anyway, so they'll sort of just say it's nice. And everyone else will just think you look like the guy off the Channel 4 television program. And I was thinking to myself, oh, he means the good-looking one on Big Brother's Little Brother. And he could see it in my face, and he just goes, no, the ugly one on the Friday Night Project. Cheers. That was good, that. Yeah, so I want to talk about this thing. It's not unpolished. I have some ideas. I'd like to see what people think about them. But it's just an idea. It's an idea about how people who do the types of jobs that we do could make money differently than we do currently. Just a sort of word on what I do. I work with John Steele at WPP, and I work as a planner on like a range of projects across different companies, and I've been doing that for a while now, and I've seen a lot of different situations. So I work with some quite trendy little companies and some big digital agencies and some big traditional advertising agencies and all kinds of companies, even Millward Brown. And I've seen lots of different situations, and I sort of everywhere, people seem to be scrabbling to get paid as well as they think they ought to get paid for the things that they do. I mean, I heard a fact recently, someone was bitching to me about how much Martin Sorrell gets paid, and I heard a fact that I think two or three people inside London get paid more than £1 million a year. And I think this year 4,000 bankers got a bonus of more than £1 million. So like, we're not really very good at getting value for what we do, and I would observe that clients, generally speaking, have got really quite good at understanding what we do for them, and actually often quite good at doing it themselves. When you go back and read, like I downloaded off Russell's blog, the JWT planning manual from 1974, I don't know if anyone else has had a look at that, and you look at it, and you basically go, that was like, it's really beautifully written, and it was like rocket science at the day. Like, no one had thought about the word like that before. You basically go to any decent client now, they've got their head around most of that stuff. They're kind of pretty good at understanding consumers. They're relatively good at writing briefs. They're not bad at coming up with ideas. I mean, we can bitch about them all we like, but they've got their head around what we do for them. In fact, one of the reasons I think a lot of the digital stuff is interesting to us is because clients don't understand it, and so we can charge them for it. You know, and it's true, generally speaking, you know, that's why bankers get paid so much money, because we can't figure out how to do it ourselves. It's the same reason my plumber gets paid too much, because I can't figure out how to do it myself. So I think this is maybe, this idea about as a way of seeing what we do and skewering it differently. And it's about the way the world works in pictures more than it does in words, and about how our businesses are actually really brilliant at working in pictures, and the companies that we serve are, by definition, really shit at working in pictures, and that therefore we could confuse them and charge them for things that we do. So that's what this is about. So, and one of the people who stimulated this thing was this guy called Kim Jones. Does anyone know who Kim Jones is or not? So Kim Jones, a young fashion designer, he works for McQueen and, he works for Umbro, and he's done some stuff with Boss, and he's got his own range. The guy's amazing. He's absolutely brilliant. He's like a young Alexander McQueen. You should check him out anyway. And I met him in this television program I was making, and asked him about this word cool and what was his view on it. And he basically goes, he goes, I hate that word. It's a rubbish word, but I've got something that's, I think, related to that. And it's why I get paid a lot of money, and he does get paid a lot of money, and he's valued by people. And he basically goes, I've got taste, and more specifically, I've got visual taste. That's what I have. The things that I like the look of, other people want to buy. And you spend time around him and in his home, and he does have visual taste. And do you know what? I wouldn't mind living in his house, and I wouldn't mind buying the layout he has on his desk, and I wouldn't mind having the way he arranges icons on his desktop. He just has a way of approaching the world and looking at it that's broadly quite delicious. That's what he does. And I was thinking, that's a really interesting definition of what can. It's not the only way, but one way of making something seem appealing, cool, and valuable. And it got me thinking about a broader idea of the culture we live in being very visual. So I just want to kind of run through what I think this thing is that's a visual culture, and then how I think business operates within that culture, and then maybe just a quick word on what we could do to operate in it. So just like romp through history, and this is, if anyone knows more about this in the room, please tell me afterwards, because I'm just like, I just went and read some books, so I don't know much about this bit. But so how did we get to a visual culture? We, when life emerged, it started as small organisms, and we developed senses, interestingly, because things like eyes and ears are quite a good way of predicting danger. Like, it's really bad news if you touch a poisonous frog or if you touch a shark. Because it'd be great if you could see it coming, because then you could work out something to do. Eyes are actually the beginning of our process for strategy. Quite interesting. It's one of the first things that allows you to plan in advance. It's also quite interesting, actually, sort of slight diversion. There's a paradox as well, which is eyes are the one thing that tricks us more than anything else. If you ask people, for example, just as a slight diversion, but if you ask people, for example, how to, if they could fold a tissue paper again and again and again and again and again and again and again, 25 to 30 times how thick it might be, they kind of guess, maybe like this or like this. You kind of get to feet thick when you do stuff like that. It's because we're very bad at measuring beyond our own experience with things about eyes when we're asked to imagine stuff in our head. And strangely, we developed language and numbers as a way of measuring stuff beyond our experience. But anyway, blah, 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 sidestep. Eyes, one of the senses, really good way of you having a strategic approach to your life. Actually starts to make you think about things. And then cultures start to do things in response to eyes. So one of the first signs of kind of an evolved culture, beyond a functioning human being or a functioning organism, one of the first signs of an evolved culture or a way of life is that you have visual things, and they're often a way of telling stories or transmitting information over distance or time. So, for example, you draw a picture on a wall so that someone later can tell what you were doing earlier. Or you have a coin so that you can have a measure of something which someone else will be able to see in a different place, and they'll be able to understand what you intended from the place you sent it. So visual stuff is a really good way of transmitting and preserving information over distance or time, and then you get all kinds of things in cultures developing which are like, I mean, this is just two examples plucked out of the sky, Roman money or rugs as gifts or drawings on cave walls. But broadly speaking, visual things have always been a luxury in human history or an uncommon necessity, right? So you basically go, a drawing on a wall, that is luxury. Art galleries now, they seem kind of relatively normal. In the Renaissance, seeing an image rendered that looked sort of like 3D, it would have been like mind-boggling. Mind-boggling. I've never seen anything like that. Total luxury. Or uncommon necessity, like money. You know, really, really useful, helpful thing, but it's one of the very few things in the world that is visually driven. There are also occasionally tools, which are quite interesting, which kind of indicate about how powerful this visual culture is. Abacus has been around for donkey's years, and it's incredible how simple that visual tool is and how powerful it is. Makes up for a real mental deficiency we have, basically. We're very bad, very, very bad naturally at numbers as human beings. A small, tricky visual tool can get up for a huge mental deficiency that we have. So this visual sense that we have developed as a way of trying to navigate the world and make stuff less dangerous for us, became a way of us thinking, became part of our culture, but was broadly quite a rare thing for us to have artifacts around it. What we've seen in the last kind of 200 years, 150, 200 years, is that visual culture has completely changed. And it's become not rare or uncommon or about luxury or about just necessity. It's become about, like, life. You know, probably one of the beginnings of that was when you get what people have commonly referred to as Victoriana, or the rise of the spectacular. Or you basically, when you get leisure coming into the world, you get lots of people who are interested in looking at things. So you get Isambard Kingdom Brunei making bridges that not only are functional, but they have a visual appeal, and actually people used to go and visit them just to see the thing. You get fairs, you get freak shows, you get all of these things which are responses to what people would like to do when they have time on their hands, and one of them is to look at some stuff. You also get, you start to get, with the rise of news media, you start to get people telling stories through visual means. One of the most famous ones, events. One of the most famous, can you just turn it down? One of the most famous is the Hindenburg disaster. Really interesting. It's, have you heard of, there's a very famous verbal phrase that goes with that, which is, oh, the humanity, as they see the people running away from the burning Hindenburg. Interestingly, that was actually only put on after the event. This was filmed, then that voice was put on it on a newsreel, and it was presented in cinemas around the world. But what was really interesting about this as a visual event was this was the first simultaneous media event. So you had, within 24 hours, a picture of something that happened replicated all over the world. And now, of course, we consider that to be completely normal, but that was one of the first things of that happening. And it's another step forward in the kind of growth of visual culture. Then you get another powerful thing that's happened in the last 50 years in visual culture is about classifications and using the visual to help us understand and group the world. Some of the most brilliant visual communicators in the last 60 or 70 years were the Nazis. This is a horrific thing. This is the races of the world in triangles, and they really understood the power of the visual. They had this great phrase, which I don't know in German, but I know in English. It probably sounds weird in German. The German every day shall be beautiful. They had that was from the Bureau of Beauty and Labor. And they understood kind of branding, architecture, art, and the way that this could create a sense of the world for people. In fact, Goebbels, who was really into this is a shot from a film called Kohlberg, which was shot a couple of weeks before the fall of Berlin. And they thought it was supposed to be about the glory of the German people. And he actually diverted 20,000 troops from the front line to make this film about the glory of Germany, to show across Germany, because they were understanding that pictures were a fantastic way of shaping people's understanding of the world, and investing sort of time and money in it. So basically, we've got this kind of rise of as people have had more leisure and also the growth of media, we've got the rise of the visual as the way of culture operating. And I can just find my mouse here. Is it on that page? I'm going to go 2 down. I'm going to skip this one. Just to think about how visual the world has become, so how far this growth and explosion has gone, I think it's worth sort of thinking about the types of places that we live in. So something like half of all people, this is a street in India, something like half of all people now live in cities around the world. And the environment there, that's sort of, and that's just set to grow, by the way. The environment there in cities is a profoundly visual environment, even before you take any of the machines or the interfaces that people have to navigate that environment. So it's a world of communication, it's a world of advertising, it's a world of color, it's a world of branding, logos, clothing, everything where people are using pictures and imagery as a way of communicating and shaping their understanding of that place. Actually, a lot more so than the countryside. And then when you start to think about the tools that people use all over the world, so in developed but also now in developing markets, to navigate that environment, you just get a kind of incredible sense that everything is happening in pictures. So starting with the most obvious, televisions, in America, that's the percentage of their year that an American spends, well, it's actually defined as watching TV, but I'll permit it to be on, TV on. It's basically 70 days a year your average American spends kind of watching television. If you kind of broaden that out a little bit to go, what about when you start to go cinema, video games, internet, which I would say all of those ones you're really watching, you're up to, I don't know how many this is in days, but you're up from 1,669 hours to 2,800 hours. So probably that's about 70, 90, 100 and 110 days. You're up to this kind of percentage of time spent basically looking at a screen. Right, that's got to change the way that we understand the world. It's like a profoundly screen-based culture. If you start to add in, and I think this is where it gets really kind of amazing, if you start to add in mobile phones, it's very difficult to work out how much time people spend looking at those. Basically go, how much of the world is screen-based, how much of the world is screens? Basically, this is all of the computers in the world. This is all the televisions in the world, and that's all the phones in the world. So we're kind of, this is where we are now, so we're kind of at something like 5 billion screens, nearly a screen each. And by 2010, we're expected to be more roughly actually at a screen each, and beyond 2010 we get to more than one screen each. So we've got a world population where within 10 years, 60 to 70% of people are going to be living in cities, which are profoundly visual places driven by looks and presentation, just from buildings and the imagery that surrounds it. And we've got people who are increasingly spending extraordinary amounts of time looking at screens from, you know, the time that they're born. We have a really visual culture. This visual culture is not going anywhere. And I'd say if business is just like the machinery that operates in culture to push stuff around and try and extract money from it to pay people so that they can push other stuff around, we've got visual business. We've got businesses where the value of those companies is often profoundly tied to visual things. Now that kind of sort of like, maybe it's just obvious, but I don't think that many people are operating like they have visual businesses. They're really bad at operating like they have visual businesses. When you go, things like the Beetle or the design of the Motorola Razr can profoundly transform the fortunes of a company based predominantly on presentation. That's kind of obvious. I mean, I think you basically start to look at all companies though, and you can see that a lot of how they work is visually driven. Not all of it, but a lot of how they work is visually driven. So I basically go, Google winds me up when people talk about Google's fantastic search technology. Google wasn't successful because it had brilliant search technology. It was successful because they had less words on the page. You know, it was a beautiful, beautiful, clean, empty interface, and it made you want to use it. They had something that they talk about as the 50-plus word rule, and just, you know, there are never more than that. And I think it's interesting, when Sun talk about the internet, they did some research on it about how people read the internet. And, you know, I know some people do, but broadly, most people don't read the internet. They kind of scan the internet. They use it much more like a picture than they do like a book. And I think, you know, I don't know whether this is the cause or the effect of what's going on, but something's changing in the way that something's developing and continuing to emerge in the way that we interface with the world. It's so profoundly visually driven. I think product design is a hugely powerful aspect of this that we often sort of end up getting given something at the factory gates and then told to make pictures about it. And I think that's very frustrating. I think the way things look as they're made is something that we should have our hands on, because it's so much part of the value of these companies that's created that we could successfully influence. I think some of the really interesting stuff that I've worked on has been about the design and the look and the presentation of machines, as well as just advertising. So one brilliant sort of story from that part of the world is about a book that a guy called Donald Norman's written called Emotional Design. I don't know if you know this machine. Has anyone ever been in a Mercedes and used one of those? It's sort of reckoned to be one of the best pieces of functional design in the world. It's a really clever way of adjusting the seat position in your car, because it's actually shaped like the seat is. So, you know, if you want the seat to tip back, you press the seat tip back a bit. Good idea. And he spent kind of 20 years getting famous for supporting that type of design. He called it the design of everyday things, and he said basically form should follow the function of stuff. And then he sort of started thinking about this lemon squeezer, which is basically probably functionally one of the shittest lemon squeezers man could have invented. Has anyone ever used one? The Philippe Stark lemon squeezer. They are rubbish for squeezing lemons, but they look cool, and people buy them. So he's like, hold on, that doesn't make any sense. Why do people want things like that? And what he quite quickly got to as an understanding of the way the world increasingly operates is form shouldn't always follow function, because people like to use beautiful things. And there's actually kind of really interesting, there's kind of some quite deep research around this. So one of the best things I've learned about recently is this guy called Noam Traktinsky, who did some research on how people use ATM machines. And he basically made some ATM machines that were more beautiful, but worked shit. So they actually had too many keystrokes to get to what you want to, and the lines, the bits on the screen weren't lined up with the bit you press at the side, and all that annoying stuff that happens when you go to an ATM machine. And some ATM machines that were ugly, but worked brilliantly. And what he found is, not only do the ones that are more beautiful, not only do people think they're going to work better, not only do people think that they worked better, but they actually did work better. People can use those better than ugly machines. Quite interestingly, he repeated his study. He did his study in two places. He did it in Japan first, and then he thought, maybe it's only working in Japan because Japanese people love beautiful things. So he went and did it in what he thought was, and I'm not placing any judgment on this, but he went, it's the most aesthetically ugly culture in the world, and he went to Israel. He says that's just the worst place. And he doesn't explain it in his paper, he just writes it, and then he moves on. Brilliant, that's it. So it's just funny. But anyway, so, you know, not only is beauty something that's sort of nice to have around and maybe can sell a prettier car, it's actually, it makes machines and things that we want to do more pleasant for us. We think they're going to be better to do, we think they were better to do, but not only that, they actually are better to do if they look better. Now, so you've got this world, you've got visual culture, you've got visual businesses that operate within that culture, with a lot of the value of those companies is tied up in visual things, but basically, you've got no visual businessmen, right? So the people who run these companies are really, really crap at this stuff. That is a visual businessman, guy with zany tie, right? Not visual business, right? So you basically go, all the top business schools in the States, not one of them has got a visual course that you can do. There's not a FTSE 100 company that's got a guy on the board who's got any visual training. The same for the States as well. These guys are and women are really, really bad at this kind of stuff, and it's no wonder actually, because they've been bred of a life and an approach that's defined by factories and process controls. And factories and process controls develop one part of your brain. In practice, you actually get really good at one part of mathematical, logical side of your brain. They don't develop the visual part of your brain. So they actually spend, 20, 30 years getting to the top of one of these businesses, schooling themselves in an approach to the world, which means that they're always going to be less good at this kind of visual stuff than we are. So it's a kind of a world of process control models, and it's the mindset of a Ford factory. If anyone who's worked with a big business, the management of the processes that run that business and the numbers and the words of that business is something they're incredibly schooled in. But the understanding of the pictures of that business is something that they're often incredibly bad at. And I basically I think there's a really big opportunity for us to be the types of people, and when I say us, I kind of mean everyone who operates in this sphere broadly of providing marketing and creative services to companies, to offer this type of visual skill to these types of people, because they don't have it themselves, they don't understand it, but they're starting to understand it can have value for their companies. So, you look at the guys who charge a lot to, for example, one of my old clients, a major mobile phone manufacturer. The people who get lots and lots of money out of those guys are the people who are able to tell them what look is going to be valuable for those products, both in how the physical things manifested, but also in how the look of the inside of the machine is when you start to use the software of it. I know there's a lot of people in Silicon Valley who are starting to provide services like this. I know there are big major FMCG manufacturers who are looking to get they don't know what they're looking for, but they're looking for art director style skills to interface with their boards, either to be on their boards or to advise their boards or to spend time with them. And we're like naturally really good at that. I'd say compared to most other groups of companies, we're probably the best at that kind of stuff in the world. And I sense there's an opportunity to make money out of it. So my kind of, our opportunity is to be the best visual businesses, and to kind of end where I started with Kim Jones. He goes, visual taste is this thing that he's got. We may not be quite as good as Kim, but we have got some of this stuff. Those clients don't have some of that stuff. And I think if we were clever, we could get really good at making them pay for it. Thank you.